Laughter echoes in the humid summer night as three teenagers splash gleefully in a pristine, iridescent pool. The camera pulls back, revealing a pale, gaunt face in the darkness of a window, watching. A single tear rolls down her cheek, illuminated by the distant city lights before her expression hardens. Her fingers slowly wrap around a cold, smooth object, and the faint, chilling click of a deadbolt echoes in the silence. The first sound was always the gate, a whisper of rusted metal, quickly followed by the dull thud of it swinging shut. Ilara Thorne didn't need to see them anymore. She could tell by the cadence of their steps on the flagstone path, the hushed giggles that carried on the breeze, the inevitable triumphant splash that shattered the glassy surface of her pool. It had been 10 weeks of this, 10 weeks of the same three shadows desecrating the one place in her life that held a sacred, devastating meaning. The police had been no help. The first time she had called them, frantic. "They're trespassing. On my property," she'd said, her voice shaking with an emotion she couldn't quite name. The officer on the other end, a man with a tired, flat tone, had simply sighed. "Ma'am, it's a swimming pool. They're kids. Unless they're damaging property or threatening you, there's not much we can do. Just put up a sign." She had. A large, garish sign, purchased at the local hardware store and bolted to the wrought iron gate herself. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." It had been there for exactly one night before it was found crumpled and thrown into the bushes, a crude, obscene drawing scrawled on its back in black permanent marker. Her helplessness had begun to curdle into something venomous. From her bedroom window, a vantage point she now occupied every night around midnight, Ilara watched them. She knew their silhouettes by heart. The tall, lanky one, Leo, with his loud laugh and penchant for cannonballs. The girl with the long, dark hair, Maya, who always seemed a little more hesitant, a little less at ease with their nighttime crime. And Chloe, the ringleader, small and fierce, the one who'd torn down the sign and had a laugh that was a little too sharp, a little too knowing. Tonight, their laughter was particularly loud. They were playing a game, something with a pool noodle, their shouts and cheers carrying across the manicured grounds. Ilara's knuckles were white, clutching the cool marble windowsill. Every ripple they made in the water was a stab in her chest. Every splash was a desecration. The pool was her mausoleum. It had been a gift, her husband Marcus's final grand gesture before the cancer took him. He had designed it himself, the sweeping curves, the infinity edge, the gentle cascade of a waterfall into the deep end. But a year after Marcus, the pool took her too. It was here, on a beautiful, sun-drenched Saturday, that her 6-year-old daughter Lily had slipped away from her supervision for a single, fatal minute. Ilara had found her floating, a pale, lifeless doll. The image was burned into her mind, a constant reel of agony that played every time she looked at the water. The police had called it a tragic accident. The town had offered their condolences. Everyone had moved on. But Ilara hadn't. She had sold the furniture, let the yard go wild, and wrapped herself in a shroud of grief so thick it had become her skin. The pool was all that remained of the life she once had, a monument to her twin losses. And these children, with their reckless joy and careless laughter, were dancing on her daughter's grave. They didn't just trespass. They mocked her pain. Ilara backed away from the window, her mind a cold, calculating machine. The helplessness was gone, replaced by a terrible resolve. She had tried the legal route, the polite route, the pleading route. None of it had worked. They had taken her grief and turned it into their playground. She had to fight back on her own terms, to make them understand that this was not a place for games, but a place of profound sorrow. She wouldn't call the police. She would ensure they never came back. Not with threats, not with warnings, but with a terror so absolute it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. She walked purposefully down the grand staircase, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. The house, once full of light and laughter, was a maze of dark, still air. She went to the basement, to a storage room full of relics from her old life. She moved aside boxes of Christmas decorations and old photo albums until she found it. A heavy black box. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a collection of high-tech audio equipment. Marcus had been an amateur sound engineer, a hobbyist who loved to experiment with ambient sound and recording. Ilara had always teased him about his nerd toys, never imagining they would one day be the instruments of her revenge. She pulled out a small, highly sensitive microphone and a long, waterproof cable. Back upstairs, she went into the pool equipment room, a small space behind the waterfall feature. She pulled out a small, waterproof speaker designed to be submerged in water. She attached it to the cable, her movements precise and deliberate. She had a plan, one that had come to her in a flash of inspiration a week ago, a plan that she'd been meticulously perfecting in her mind ever since. Tonight was the night. The laughter from the pool had died down. She heard a soft splash as someone climbed out, and the low murmur of conversation. Now was the time. She had to be quick. She crept out the side door, staying low and in the shadows, navigating the familiar landscape of her backyard. She followed the perimeter of the pool, the sound of the teenagers' voices a constant grating presence. She reached the pump room. The machinery was off, silent for the night. Perfect. She unspooled the waterproof cable, carefully feeding it into the main intake pipe of the pool's filtration system. The speaker, small and black, slipped easily into the pipe. The cord was long enough that it could reach the deep end, its presence undetectable. She pulled out her phone, which was connected to a small transmitter in her pocket. It was the other piece of the puzzle. Marcus's toys had been surprisingly sophisticated as she re-entered the house. She watched from the kitchen window. The three of them were sitting on the edge of the pool now, their feet dangling in the water, their voices hushed, a feeling of camaraderie in the air. Ilara's gaze lingered on the girl, Chloe. It was always Chloe who laughed the loudest. It was always Chloe who seemed to enjoy the transgression the most. She would be the first to feel it. Ilara's thumb hovered over the record button on her phone. She had spent days in the soundproof basement, meticulously editing a single audio clip. It was a complex soundscape, a chilling collage of whispers and static, and something else, something she had recorded herself, a little girl's voice. The clip was short, less than 10 seconds. It was designed to play just once, on a loop. Her thumb pressed down. She saw it first in Maya's face. The girl's head tilted slightly, a quizzical expression. Then Leo, who stopped mid-sentence. And, finally, Chloe, her smirk faltering. A sound had come from the water, a soft, distorted whisper that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the pool, a child's voice singing a lullaby but reversed, slow and guttural. The three of them fell silent, their feet still in the water, listening. The sound grew, swelling with a static-filled dissonance, and then it resolved into a clear, devastating phrase. "Mommy, it's cold down here." The laughter was gone. All that remained was a stillness so profound it was a sound in itself. The three teenagers, their faces pale in the moonlight, stared into the black water, and Ilara, watching, from the darkness felt a terrible satisfaction, knowing the terror had only just begun. The whispered words hung in the air, a phantom on the breeze. Chloe, her feet still dangling in the cool water, felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. Maya's eyes were wide, fixed on the rippling surface of the pool. Leo, who had been about to say something to Maya, stopped, his mouth slightly agape. For a full, heavy minute, there was only the buzzing of the cicadas and the distant drone of a car on the highway. "Did you guys—" Maya finally managed, her voice a fragile wisp. "It was just the pump," Chloe said. her voice a little too loud, a little too quick. She pulled her feet from the water, the splash sounding deafening in the sudden silence. The filter probably kicked on. Weird sound. "The pump is off at night, Chloe," Leo said, his voice quiet. He looked at her, then back at the water. "You know that. We've been coming here for months." Chloe stood up, wiping her hands on her shorts. "So, maybe it's a new setting or a prank. Some kids probably put a speaker in there. It's not a big deal." But her bravado felt thin, a flimsy shield against the cold certainty that had settled in her stomach. She hadn't heard a pump. She had heard a voice. It said, "Mommy, it's cold down here," Maya whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. It was a little girl's voice. "It was some dumb kid trying to scare us," Chloe snapped, the defensiveness a raw nerve. She grabbed her towel, not bothering to dry off, and threw it over her shoulder. "Let's go. This is stupid." Leo didn't move. He was staring at the water, at the faint glow of the underwater lights. "This isn't like the usual stuff." That sounded real. "Real? Or just a really good recording?" Chloe retorted, her tone sharp with irritation. She hated being scared. It felt weak, and she was never weak. They had been sneaking into this pool all summer, a rebellion against their monotonous suburban lives. It was their secret, their beautiful, careless defiance. The thrill of it was the point. This sudden, supernatural dread was ruining everything. "I'm leaving," Maya said, her voice shaking now. She scrambled to her feet, her movements clumsy with fear. "I'm not staying here. I'm going home." Chloe sighed, an exasperated puff of air. "Fine, go, but I'm not running from some stupid joke. It's just a house. It's just a pool." "A pool where a little girl drowned, Chloe," Maya shot back, her voice suddenly strong with accusation. "Everyone knows that story. They say she haunts the house." The words hit Chloe like a physical blow. The story was a local legend, a ghost story they had whispered about in the darkness of their bedrooms, but she had never believed it. It was just an urban myth, a piece of macabre gossip that gave their trespassing an extra frisson of danger. Now, it felt horribly, devastatingly real. "That's just talk," Chloe said, but her voice was flat. Leo finally stood, his shoulders slumped. "I think we should just go, man. It's not worth it." He looked at Chloe, his expression a mix of concern and fear. "Seriously, let's just call it a night." The unity was gone. The summer fun had curdled. Chloe saw the fear in both their faces, saw them already walking away from her, from their shared secret. The power she had over them, the cool, untouchable bravado that made her their leader, was dissolving in the face of this invisible threat. A different kind of fear, colder and more personal, rose up in her. It wasn't just a prank. This was a direct attack. Elara, watching from the kitchen window, smiled, a grim, humorless curve of her lips. They were leaving. Good. But the lesson was just beginning. She watched them hurry across the flagstone patio, their shadows stretching and shrinking in the moonlight. As they reached the gate, she clicked a button on her phone, and the porch light above their heads flickered once, then went out completely. The sudden, total darkness seemed to swallow them, their anxious whispers the only sound in the black. Leo fumbled with the latch, his hands shaking. The gate creaked open and they slipped through, disappearing onto the sidewalk. Elara didn't move. She kept her eyes on the gate, and after a moment she saw it. A small, dark shape. She hadn't imagined it. A thin, black wire was tied to the top of the gate's handle, a wire that led back into the shadows of her garden. She had an hour, maybe less, before they realized it was gone. She had to be quick. She slipped outside, her movements silent, and located the object she had left in the bushes earlier. A small, motion-activated camera. It was designed to capture wildlife, but its infrared lens was perfect for the dark. She had positioned it just inside the gate, hidden behind a thick patch of overgrown hydrangeas. She unplugged it, took out the SD card, and returned to the quiet of her home. Inside, she went straight to her husband's study. The room was a museum of his life, filled with books and maps and the comforting scent of leather and old paper. She sat at his desk, her fingers flying over the keys of his old laptop. She inserted the tiny SD card into a slot on the side, and a folder of images popped up. Her gaze fell on the last few photos. They were a series of blurry, low-light images. The first showed Chloe's hand, the small, slender fingers wrapped around the iron handle of the gate. The next showed her pulling, the sign from its hinges. The last one, from just an hour ago, was a perfect, clear shot of her face as she looked back over her shoulder, a final confident smirk on her lips before she slipped into the pool. It was an expression of pure, unadulterated pleasure in her. Defiance. Ilara copied the images to the laptop's hard drive, her face a blank mask. She knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about making them afraid anymore. It was about making them feel seen. She took out a sleek, modern device from a drawer, a small, portable projector Marcus had used for outdoor movie nights. She connected it to the laptop, and a thin, powerful beam of light shot out into the air. She returned to the kitchen window and waited. She knew their route home. She had been watching them for months. The three of them lived in the same cul-de-sac, a few blocks away. They would walk together, a huddle of anxious energy, and then split off to their respective homes. A faint light appeared at the end of her street. She saw them, a nervous cluster, their phones illuminating their pale faces as they walked. They were still talking about the voice. She heard a fragment of Chloe's voice carried on the wind. "It was just a stupid speaker, you guys. We're not going to let some old lady scare us out of her stupid pool." Ilara's lips thinned into a hard line. She lifted the projector, aiming it at the two-story brick house across the street. The house was a blank canvas, its windows dark. As the teenagers approached, she hit play on the laptop. A single image materialized on the side of the house, projected from Ilara's window with a flawless, silent precision. It was the photo of Chloe, the one taken just an hour ago, her face perfectly clear, her confident, defiant smirk, frozen in a ghostly black-and-white image. The teenagers stopped dead. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Leo took a step back, but Chloe stood still, her eyes fixed on the enormous, spectral image of her own face, smiling that same defiant smile. The projector held the image for 10 seconds, a silent, damning accusation. Then, as a final touch, Ilara added another, smaller, image beneath it. A single line of text, written in a child's crude handwriting. "I know where you live." The image on the brick wall across the street was a phantom, an impossible and terrifying manifestation of their crime. Chloe, her jaw locked, stared at the giant, ghostly face of herself, her smirk mocking her from the side of her neighbor's house. The crude text beneath it, "I know where you live," felt like a brand burned into her mind. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, a choked sob escaping her lips. She staggered back, bumping into Leo. He was staring too, but his terror had a different quality. A cold, calculating fear that this was no longer a game. "That's not funny," Chloe said, her voice a strained rasp. She looked up and down the street, at the dark houses, the silent trees. There was no one there. No one to hold the projector, no one to laugh at their horror. The image vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving a blank, ordinary wall. "Was her," Maya said, tears streaming down her face. "The old lady, she's crazy. She's a witch." "She's not a witch, she's just some psycho with a projector," Chloe snapped, her fear twisting into an angry denial. She had to explain this away. It was the only way to hold on to her control, her carefully constructed image of invincibility. "Maybe she's been waiting, watching us. We just..." We messed up. Messed up, Leo scoffed, his voice laced with a bitter fury. He had been Chloe's loyal lieutenant, a silent accomplice to her plans. Now, his loyalty was gone. Messed up is calling a prank on us. This is different. This is her showing us she's been watching us. She knows where we live, Chloe. My house is right there. Your house is right there. He gestured wildly down the street. This isn't a game to her. Then what is it? Chloe challenged, her own anger flaring up to meet his. Revenge? For what? Using her stupid pool? It's been empty forever. It's not just a pool, Chloe, Maya cried, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. The story's real. Her daughter, she died in that pool. That's why she's so messed up. This is a monument to her dead kid. And you've been treating it like your own personal party spot. Chloe recoiled as if struck. The local legend had always been a distant, abstract thing. The fact that Maya was using it to justify this terrifying escalation felt like a betrayal. It's not my fault her kid drowned, she said, the words coming out more viciously than she intended. No, but it's your fault she's doing this, Leo said, his voice flat. He was already walking away, heading towards his own driveway. She's not messing around, we're done. I'm done with that pool, and I'm done with this whole stupid thing. Maya followed him, not even bothering to look back. I'm calling my mom, she said, her voice shaking. I'm telling her everything. Chloe stood alone in the dark, the words ringing in her ears. I know where you live. The camaraderie, the thrill, the shared secret. It was all gone. Replaced by a cold, isolating terror, she had pushed them too far, and now they were leaving her to face the consequences alone. The ghost wasn't in the pool anymore. It was in her mind. Alara watched the brief, furious argument play out from her window. She saw the group dissolve, the two of them walking away from Chloe. Good. The wedge had been driven. But it wasn't enough. She had to break her, break the ringleader. Only then would the terror be permanent. She didn't sleep that night. She spent the hours until dawn in her husband's study, a room that had once felt like a tomb and now felt like a war room. She had the security camera footage, the images of Chloe, the proof. She had watched the young girl for months, studied her movements, her routines, her friends. Now, she would use that knowledge. She found Chloe's Instagram profile easily. The girl's life was an open book. Photos with her parents, with Maya and Leo, selfies in her bedroom, a picture of her dog curled up on her bed. A post from 2 weeks ago, a photo of a new laptop with the caption, "Finally, time for some serious gaming." Alara studied the picture of the laptop, the stickers on the lid, the open browser, the background. It was all there. She opened up a new browser window and began to work. Her husband, Marcus, had been more than a sound engineer. He had been a cybersecurity specialist in his old life, a hobby he had continued long after he retired. She had never paid much attention to the files and programs on his computer, but now a grim instinct guided her. She found a series of complex scripts he had written, programs designed to find and exploit network vulnerabilities, to run silent scans, to slip into systems without a trace. She ran a quick IP scan of the cul-de-sac. It was a simple trick, but effective. She found Chloe's Wi-Fi network within minutes. It was protected, but Marcus's scripts were designed to run a brute force attack, to methodically try every combination of common passwords. She set the program to run, the cursor blinking, a silent predator stalking its prey. It took 5 hours. Alara drank 3 cups of black coffee, her eyes never leaving the screen. Just before the sun came up, a line of green text appeared. Access. Granted, a cold, triumphant shiver went down Alara's spine. She was in. She had full access to Chloe's network. She could see every connected device. The phone, the laptop, a smart TV in the living room. The power was intoxicating. She could do so much more than project a picture on a wall. She could get inside her head. Chloe woke up to her phone vibrating on her nightstand. She reached for it, her hand trembling. It was a new notification, a message from her best friend Sarah, who lived in another town. "Dude, WTF? Why did you do that?" Chloe's heart sank. She opened the message. There was a photo attached. It was the photo from the security camera, the one Alara had taken of her smirking at the gate, an expression of pure, defiant joy. Chloe had a separate Instagram account, one for her close friends, a private one where she posted all her adventures, all her rebellions. Her phone vibrated again. Another photo, a picture of the mangled, crumpled sign. "You've been messing with that lady's stuff?" "That's messed up, Chloe." She scrolled through her messages. All of her friends were messaging her, all of them seeing the same photos. But she hadn't posted them. She was certain of it. A cold wave of dread washed over her. She knew in her gut who had. The old woman hadn't just threatened her, she had exposed her. And she was doing it through the one thing Chloe cared about most: her reputation. As she frantically deleted the photos, a new message appeared in her private group chat. But it wasn't from any of her friends. It was from her own account, a message she hadn't typed. "I know what you did. I saw you. She saw you." Chloe's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. A new audio file appeared in the chat, a small black file icon. She clicked it, and a sound came out. It was a single, solitary word, whispered with the faint static of a poor recording. A word that filled her with a profound, bone-deep fear. Chloe. She threw the phone across the room as if it were on fire. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the eerie whisper echoing in the silence of her bedroom. She scrambled out of bed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was not safe. The haunting wasn't in the pool. It was in her phone. It had followed her home. She ran to her bedroom door and locked it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the key. She stood there, her back pressed against the wood, listening. And from her laptop, still on her desk, she heard it. A soft, chilling, off-key lullaby, the same one from the pool. It was her laptop's new startup sound. She had been compromised. Her privacy invaded, her world turned upside down. She was trapped, and the old woman's ghost was in her house with her. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of her bedroom, the phone on the floor like a live grenade. The off-key lullaby from her laptop, a ghostly, mechanical tune, felt like a physical presence in the room. It was everywhere and nowhere all at once. Her bedroom, once a sanctuary of posters and personal chaos, was now a digital prison. The old woman's ghost wasn't just in the house, it was in the walls, in the electronics. A silent, all-seeing eye. "Chloe, are you okay?" I heard a thud. It was her mom standing in the doorway, her face creased with concern. She wore a simple robe, her hair tied back, a normal, non-haunted person in a world that had suddenly gone wrong. Chloe's mind raced. How do you explain this? That a woman you've been taunting has hacked your life and is now whispering your name through your phone? "It's nothing, Mom. I dropped my phone." Chloe's voice was a strained whisper, her eyes darting between her laptop and the phone on the floor. She had to hide it, to make it stop. Her mom, however, was already taking a step inside, her gaze falling on the laptop. "What's that awful sound?" Before Chloe could react, the lullaby stopped. A new sound filled the air, a faint rustling static that emanated from the laptop's speakers. Her mom tilted her head, confused. Then a voice emerged from the static, clear and chillingly familiar. "Hello, Mrs. Daniels." Chloe's blood ran cold. It wasn't a robot voice, not a deep fake. It was Alara's voice, calm and even, a terrible parody of a polite greeting. Her mother froze, her eyes widening. She looked at Chloe, then back at the laptop, a dawning horror in her expression. "Chloe, what is going on?" her mom demanded. her voice hard with suspicion. "Who is that? Who are you talking to?" "It's not me," Chloe shrieked, a raw, panicked sound. "It's her, the lady from the pool. She's doing something to my laptop." Her mom's gaze hardened, the confusion in her eyes replaced by a weary parental disappointment. "Chloe, this isn't funny. Your father and I are trying to sleep. Turn that off and go to bed, and we'll talk about this in the morning." "But Mom, listen, she just said your name," Chloe pleaded, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. The voice from the laptop returned, softer now, but with an edge of quiet menace. "We both know it's not a joke, Chloe. Your friends do, too. You see, I sent them a few memories." Chloe's mom grabbed the laptop, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. She slammed it shut, the click of the lid a final mocking punctuation. "That's enough. Whatever this is, you're grounded until you tell us the truth." She turned and left the room, leaving Chloe alone again in the sudden, echoing silence. The isolation was more terrifying than the whispers. They thought she was a liar. They wouldn't believe her until it was too late. Desperate, Chloe grabbed her phone from the floor. She had to show them. She opened her group chat. The photos were gone. All of them. The crumpled sign, the shot of her face, the messages. They had been deleted, every trace of the hauntings scrubbed clean. But the audio file was still there, the single word Chloe, an accusation in her history. She clicked it. Nothing happened. The file was corrupt, an empty shell of the terror it had once held. Alara hadn't just exposed her, she had cleaned up the crime scene, leaving Chloe with no evidence, no proof, and no one to believe her. Chloe's panic began to curdle into a cold, furious resolve. She wouldn't just let this happen. She was not a victim. She would find this woman, confront her face to face, and make her stop. She would delete this ghost from her life the same way Alara had deleted the photos from her phone. She would beat her at her own game. She spent the rest of the night in a state of hyper-alertness, her eyes burning, her heart pounding. She tried to retrace Alara's steps, to think like her. She was a professional, a hacker. She had used a script to get into the network. Maybe she left a back door? Chloe, an avid gamer, had a passing knowledge of code. She started with the basics, running a malware scan on her laptop. Nothing. The program was clean. Her network was secure. Alara hadn't left a trace. It was as if she had never been there at all. This was no amateur. This was something far more dangerous. Alara, sitting at Marcus's desk, watched Chloe's fruitless attempts on her own screen. She had a full view of Chloe's laptop, her phone, her tablet, every keystroke, every frantic tap, every search query. She had built the perfect virtual prison. She had cleaned up the files to make it look like a paranoid delusion, to isolate the girl from her family, from her friends. She smiled, a brittle, weary expression. This was so much more satisfying than simple terror. This was justice. She wasn't doing this for herself, not really. She was doing it for Lily. She had gone to the police. She had pleaded with the parents of the teenagers. She had tried every legal, ethical way to make them understand the sacredness of her grief, and no one had listened. They had seen a pool. She had seen a grave. They had seen children. She had seen demons. She had been a mother. But now she was a judge, jury, and executioner. Her husband's tools were her weapons, and her grief was her fuel. She had spent the last 2 years in a fog of sorrow. Now she was finally clear. The goal was simple, to make them feel her pain. Not just the fear of being caught, but the fear of being exposed, of having their lives turned upside down, of being so utterly alone in their terror that it would break them. She saw a message pop up on Chloe's screen. It was from Leo. Chloe had messaged him, frantic, trying to explain. "She's in my house, Leo. She knows everything." Leo's response was a single line of text. "Don't message me again, Chloe. You're scaring me. You need help." Alara felt a deep, chilling satisfaction. The wall between them was now an unbreachable chasm. The gang of three was a single, shattered girl, alone against the world. But that wasn't enough. There had to be a final act. A public, undeniable humiliation that would be a monument to her daughter's memory. A testament to the price of their desecration. She saw Chloe's phone connect to the network. She had turned off the Wi-Fi on her phone and was now using her cellular data. A smart move. But Ilara was already a step ahead. She had installed a simple, untraceable program that bypassed her phone's cellular data connection and routed it through a hidden server. Chloe was still connected to Ilara even on the go. Ilara waited. She saw Chloe's parents' phones connect to the Wi-Fi. Perfect. She saw a notification on her own screen. Chloe's dad was leaving for work. Ilara watched him grab his phone and a travel mug, her heart pounding with a terrible, cold excitement. He was the next target. The father, who had probably laughed off his daughter's late-night adventures. He was an accomplice, and he needed to feel the consequence, too. Chloe, exhausted and terrified, finally left her room, her mind a frantic mess of plans and recriminations. She went to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee, her hands shaking so badly the mug rattled against the countertop. She had to do something. Anything. She had to expose this woman. She turned on the smart TV in the living room, a mindless reflex, hoping to distract herself. The screen flickered to life, not to her usual news channel, but to a static black and white feed. The video was shot from a high-angle security camera, the kind you would see on a porch or a gate. The image was grainy, but undeniably clear. It was her neighbor's front porch. Chloe froze. The TV screen was a window into Ilara's world, a live feed of her backyard. A message, typed in a simple white font, appeared at the bottom of the screen. "You saw me. Now everyone can see you." The TV screen then cut to her own bedroom. Her parents were now standing there, confused, trying to figure out what was happening. Her mom looked at her dad, whose face was a mixture of anger and panic. Her dad's phone vibrated, a text message. He looked at it, his eyes widening. A photo was attached, a photo from the night before, of his own daughter, their daughter, standing in front of his neighbor's house, her face a mask of terror as she stared at the projected image of herself. The camera then cut back to the living room, a close-up on Chloe. The TV screen mirrored her panic. Her mom's phone rang. It was her best friend, Sarah. Her mom looked at her, her face a mask of disappointment. She had seen the photos. She knew. The TV screen then went blank, replaced by a single damning image projected from Ilara's laptop, the crumpled sign from her pool, with the phrase, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted," written across it, but a new line of text was scrawled beneath it in a crude, spidery font. "I'm not a witch, and I know where you live. Everyone will see what you have done." And with that, the TV clicked off, leaving C. The living room was a black void, the single, dying pixel of the TV screen the only light. The sudden, total silence was heavier than any noise. Chloe stood, paralyzed, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended the digital. She could hear her parents' frantic whispers in the darkness, the frantic scramble of her dad's fingers over his phone screen. "I can't believe this," her dad, Mark, hissed, his voice a low, strangled sound. "I just got a text from Brian, Leo's dad. He said Chloe's been harassing his son, sending him images." "What is going on, Chloe?" Her mom, Maria, had found her voice. It was a sharp, accusatory blade. "Answer your father, young lady. What is this? The police were just called for a disturbance. Did you put some kind of prank on the neighbor's house?" "No, Mom, it's her. She's doing it," Chloe cried, stumbling forward, her hands outstretched in a desperate plea. "She's in our house. She's controlling everything. She sent those pictures." Mark scoffed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. She's controlling our TV, our phones. Chloe, you're not making sense. This has gone too far. We'll deal with this tomorrow. But for now, you are grounded for the rest of the summer. No phone, no laptop, no friends. But Dad, you don't understand. Chloe's voice cracked. She's a hacker. She got into our Wi-Fi. She took the pictures from a camera she hid by the gate. She's watching us right now. That's enough, Maria said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low hum. You're clearly upset, but this is a ridiculous story. The police are coming. We need to be a family and handle this. How can we handle it when she's still doing it? Chloe's voice was a frantic shriek. As if on cue, the lights in the living room began to flicker. A silent, mocking answer. The soft, rhythmic sound of the air conditioning unit in the wall began to turn on and off, a ghost sighing in the vent. Mark and Maria froze, their eyes darting around the room, the disbelief in their expressions finally beginning to crack, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar dread. The power's not out, Mark said, his voice shaky as he looked at his phone, which was still fully charged. And the thermostat is set to 72. It's 80 degrees in here. The thermostat on the wall, a smart device, suddenly lit up. The numbers began to scroll, a silent digital scream, 99, 98, 97. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, the heat a suffocating blanket. Maria gave a gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Just unplug everything, she said, her voice a thin, panicked wisp. Let's just get out of here. We can go to a hotel. We need to leave. Mark nodded, his face pale in the dim, flickering light. He grabbed Maria's hand, and they began to move towards the front door. Chloe followed them, a silent shadow. They were finally listening, finally believing. The terror was a shared experience now. But a terrible truth was dawning on Chloe. This was no longer just about punishment. This was about a lesson, and the lesson wasn't over. Mark reached for the doorknob. He turned it. Nothing. The door was locked. He jiggled it, then rattled it, his face contorting in panic. The smart lock, he muttered, his voice full of a rising hysteria. It's not opening. It's unresponsive. He took out his phone and tried to unlock it with the app. The screen on his phone flashed a single message. Access denied. The garage, Maria said, her voice strained. We can get out through the garage. Mark ran to the door leading to the garage. He pressed the button. Nothing. The door remained closed. The lights in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the bedrooms began to flicker in a syncopated, maddening rhythm. She's locked us in, Chloe whispered, her voice a flat, dead sound. The realization was a weight on her chest. Ilara wasn't a ghost. She was a warden. Ilara watched them from the security camera feed on Marcus's computer. The panic in their faces was a pure, sweet release. She saw them run from door to door, trapped in their own home, in their own perfect life. She watched them realize that their fortress was a cage. She was in full control. She was the ghost, the demon, the monster they had so carelessly created. She had built this system for Marcus, a complex network of home automation, digital security, and a hidden server that routed all their smart devices through a single control panel. He had called it a smart home. She was calling it a prison. A car pulled up outside. Red and blue lights flashed, painting the windows with a lurid, pulsing glow. The police. The neighbor who had called them must have been more than just concerned. The public humiliation was about to begin. She smiled, a cold, thin expression of pure vengeance. She opened a new file on her laptop and began to type. She was not a writer, but she had a message to convey. A message for the police, a message for the world. She would tell them what the trespassers had done. She would tell them the truth about what the pool represented. She would tell them about Lily. A loud knock sounded on the front door. The police. Mark looked at his family, at his trapped, terrified daughter, at his wife who was on the verge of tears. He had no choice. He had to open the door. Ilara watched him, his face a mask of defeat, as he pulled back the latch on the front door, the one she had left unlocked for this very purpose. A single officer, a tall, burly man with a flashlight, stood on the porch. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the street, the houses, and the dark, empty pool across the street. "Mark Daniels?" the officer asked, his voice calm and authoritative. "We got a report of a disturbance. Projectors on the house, strange noises, that sort of thing. Is everything all right here?" Mark opened his mouth to speak, but before he could get a word out, a voice came from inside the house, a terrible, disembodied sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the air itself. It was the same voice that had said, "Mommy, it's cold down here." But this time it was clear. "He lied," the voice said. "He knows what they did. They know where I am." The officer, his face a mask of confusion, looked from Mark to the house, his hand flying to his gun. "Sir, step back," he said, his voice hard. "Who is in your house?" "No one. I swear to God, there's no one," Mark cried, his hands raised in a plea. "We don't know who that is. My daughter, she's been telling me about her." The officer's eyes fell on Chloe, on her pale, terrified face. "Don't lie, Dad," the voice said, a chilling, childlike sound. "You're making it worse." Ilara watched from her window, a grim smile on her face. The police would think they were a crazy family, a family with a sick secret. They would be exposed, humiliated, and they would have no one to blame but themselves. The lesson was complete.